So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Owl House. So let's start the series. The fox started picking through the rubbish until it heard someone moving in the doorway. It instantly turned to face the door that had started to open and then hurried to hide behind the trash can. The fox slowly peeks out from behind the garbage can to discover a woman cuddling a dismal-looking girl. Tisk, oh. Oh, my baby. Now, don't worry, summer camp is only going to be for 3 months, you'll be so busy balancing checkbooks and learning to appreciate public radio, the time will fly by. But I don't like any of that stuff, the fox said, hiding once again to avoid being noticed. I like reading fantasy books with complicated backstories and editing anime clips to music, he said. The girl's footfall became a little louder as she moved closer to the garbage can. Mija, your fantasy world is holding you back, do you have any friends? Real ones, not imagined or drawn or reptilian. Summer camp is a chance to make some friends, but you have to try, can you do that? Yes, Mom, he said, and then the fox heard something being put in the garbage bin as he heard a noise. When the woman said, "Oh, I gotta go to work," the fox quilt noticed that she was more focused on her phone than her daughter, who was standing in front of the trash. This gave the fox ample time to see what looked like a book in the trash and swipe it. After saying, "Your bus is coming soon, text me when you get there, cuídate mucho, Mija, que te vaya bien," she and the fox start to walk away, waiting for him to leave as he watches the woman eventually fade from view. However, as he did so, he heard a voice. When the fox heard it, he turned to find a girl running through her trash before turning to face him. The two of them gazed at each other without saying anything, the human girl glancing at the fox who was holding a sack in his teeth with a particular book protruding from it. She yells, "Trash thief," and points to the fox, who gets wide-eyed and immediately turns tail and flees in the opposite direction, away from the girl who is chasing after him and into the woods, specifically towards an old, abandoned house. The girl is momentarily stopped by this before her eyes stop on the fox that enters the house, which gives her the courage to charge headfirst towards the haunted house, entering just as a door appears and closes behind her, just as the windows and any exposed portion of the house that shows what's inside glows bright yellow. XXXXXXXXXXX. A door suddenly appears in a pitch-black open area, and when it opens, the fox is seen running away with his bag of trash, one stolen item, until it is suddenly seized by someone and raised into the air. "Finally caught you, you adorable scampering fox," she said, holding the bag in his mouth while he stared at her. "Why did you steal my—" She interrupted herself when she saw that she appeared to be in a tent of some sort, surrounded by various objects. She was stunned by the sudden burst of smoke and the accompanying increase in weight, which abruptly stopped when she felt as though nothing weighed anything left, until the cloud eventually cleared and she was presented with a new sight. "Whoa, I thought I had a lot of weird," a child who looked to be about her age asked, "Ya, mind letting me go?" His features included long, spiky blonde hair with 2 fox ears sticking out of it, thickening and widening whisker-like marks on his cheeks, eyes with red sclera and slitted pupils, long, sharp canine teeth, and black pants, a black jacket, and an orange shirt with a black swirl design in the middle. She was still processing what she had just seen when the kid with the fox ears simply cocked an eyebrow at her before a different voice interrupted. "Finally you're back," they say, turning to the flap of what appears to have been the tent they were in. "Now let's see what the voice abruptly stops when it reveals a tall, slender woman with ivory skin, pointy ears, unlike Naruto's, maroon lips, and golden eyes. Her hair looks thick and untamed, long, and layered with 2 tones of gray, though it was once bright orange in her youth. She has an oval amber gem on her sternum, orange claw-like nails, and a single golden thong that protrude. She is wearing a sleeveless, two-tone maroon dress. The girl absorbs all of this, unlike the woman who only needs to glance at her before putting her face down. You had one job, Naruto. In my defense, she followed me. That's the same excuse last time. It was a group of baby ducklings. That's what they were called, though they were baby distractions. During their back and forth, the two's focus was instantly on the girl who had stealthily removed her book from the sack after attempting to leave but having the door vanish with an eyeball magic key. You're not going anywhere. Her expression was serious, especially since she could ask the human in front of her to explain all the junk she had and what it was used for. She gasped and ran straight to the end of the tent, lifting it up as she fled, not looking forward to see if anyone was behind her. She didn't even realize she was heading for a cliff until she looked ahead and saw herself running straight off it, screaming before being stopped by the tugging of her bag. She looked up to see the fox-human-thing waving at her. His question, "Yo, need some help?" received an instant response, and Naruto started to pull her up until she came to her knees after nearly falling to her death. She then backed up at Naruto, who had his head tilted, and abruptly stood up straight, grabbing the blonde to his surprise as he watched the worried expression on her face. The fox-eared teenager, uneasy at being touched by a stranger for the first time, started to perspire as he glanced in both directions. Where am I? Did I die? Am I in the hell? No. When she saw that the woman had a hand on her shoulder, she was quickly interrupted once more. Is this some kind of monster world then? You were a fox and now you're a human, well sorta. The girl was brought back to their tent and seated on a chair in front of them after being told, "You wish." She said, "I'm so sorry. I just wanted my book," with a terrified expression on her face before adding the inappropriate remark, "If you're going to eat my skin, just make it quick. Just do it now." Naruto appeared upset. His next remark, "Besides, not all of us do that here," startled and unsettled the girl before the woman spoke out. "What do you take us for, savages?" she asked, her eyes widening as she realized she had just upset him. She then showed off a slipper. "Eat you? Why would I eat a potential explainer? First things first, what's this?" she asked, revealing a holed rubber sneaker. "A water slipper for the beach?" The woman asks instantly, grinning. "What's this bar of green human candy? Deodorant for your armpits?" Gagging sounds. "How about this black shadow box that reflects only sadness? That's a TV. A what?" Naruto became bored and yawned during this back and forth until he heard a sound and turned to face the TV that was showing a video of a man working out. The music quickly attracted a crowd, much to the woman's surprise as they were essentially hurling money at her for the gadget. Naruto looked at her and blinked in amazement as she asked, "What did you say your name was?" After saying, "I'm Luz Nocita," she grinned broadly. As she was speaking, she began to take their money without having decided who would purchase it. "Well, Luz, that was pretty clever for a human," she said. The woman chuckled as she said, "That's kind of a weird thing for another human to say." "Oh, dear child, I'm not like you," Ida says, removing her scarf to show off her pointed ears as she sits on her table. "I'm Ida the Owl Lady, the most powerful witch on the Boiling Isles," she says, and the human immediately looks surprised, in contrast to Naruto's facepalm. "A witch?" She pointed to Naruto, who appeared to be pointing at something, which confused her until they heard it. "I am respected and feared here, The blonde is Naruto, she remarked. Caught. Crap baskets. When the guard shows up, everyone flees in terror as he destroys the television, much to the chagrin of those who wanted to purchase it but also to their ire at not being able to now retrieve their stolen funds. Ida the Owl Lady and Naruto the Fox, you two are wanted for misuse of magic and demonic misdemeanors, the guard announces, displaying a wanted poster with Ida, himself, and a Pokemon-looking pet. Whoa! Criminals, Luz now seems more awed than frightened. Naruto had raised an eyebrow at this time. You two are hereby ordered to come with me to the conformatorium. Really? Ida then followed his comments. Would you all please stop pursuing me? Nobody believed her blatant fib, I haven't done squat. And you're coming too, he said, suddenly catching Luz by the back of her hood, surprising her. His statement, for fraternizing with a criminal, startled Luz, who believed she was being criminalized for no reason at all. What? That isn't cool, the guard then yells in agony as something strikes his knee, and he drops Luz into Naruto's arms after kicking the guard in the shin, surprising the girl. And that's our criminal system, Ida said, seizing the opportunity to swing her staff into the guard's head and knocking him down before using some sort of magic to pick up everything she had in the tent and put it in a bag as Naruto let Luz go. Human, follow me, she fled with the bag on her staff, followed by Naruto and then Luz. This is insane, my mother would murder me if I pass away here. Hey! A human like you is far more precious to me alive than dead, so I won't allow them to harm you. What? With a single yell, she seizes Luz as Naruto puffs into the smoke, changing into a fox and leaping on Luz's back, while Ida escapes with her staff's wings protruding, enabling them to escape towards the sky as the aforementioned human has her eyes sealed shut. You can open your eyes now, human, she said, causing Luz to whimper until she felt a fluffy object sitting on her back. Luz opened her eyes and gasped as Naruto in his fox form said, this is a comfy seat, using her hoodie as a seat and her head as a grip. Immediately after, she slipped and ended up upside down. Get up, Naruto, who was fighting for her life, screamed until Edo helped her sit up again, much to her relief. You're a witch, flying staffs, insane monsters. What is this place? The woman simply grinned at her astonishment and wonder. As a griffin passed by them, she was interrupted by a screech. This is the Boiling Isles, every myth you humans have is caused by a little of our world leaking into yours, take, a griffin. I was aware of it. Yep, griffins, vampires, haunted teddy bears, evil demonic clowns, giraffes. Luz then raised his voice, giraffes? Oh, yeah, we banished those guys, bunch of freaks. However, Naruto appeared to be most shocked by this, as seen by his own wide eyes. Wait, but I believe they were from a scene in which Chuck Norris gave a horse a chin uppercut. Luz grinned and laughed a little at this. That's a joke, he didn't actually do that. Really, wait, Naruto turns to sit on Luz's lap and gazes at her in disbelief. Has he at least determined the time? Another joke, I thought he was your human god. Come on. When Luz sees Ida's hand stuck on the staff, he exclaims and jumps off, causing Naruto to fall and roll before puffing back into his human form to glare at Luz, who sheepishly scratches the back of her head with an apology. Now, Ida finally lands and gets off, no need to go into detail on some trivial things, he says. Oops, Ida says, grabbing it and putting it back on. That happens sometimes. Luz was now out. Can you help me return home? I've had enough adventure for today, and this is obviously not the PG fantasy world I've always dreamed about. Naruto arched an eyebrow at this, and Ida shook her head. Only if you help me first, she laughs. Ah, now, come along, human. Naruto nuzzles her to follow, and after passing a few trees, they come to a stop in a clearing. Whoa! Aren't you concerned that those guards might discover us? She asked, focusing on the big mansion they were approaching and stopping in front of the entrance. When the owl head on the door spoke, Edo answered, "Nope, my house has a state-of-the-art defense system," and then he cringed internally. Hoot! Please enter your password. Oh, Naruto's eyes narrowed and he put a hand on his chin upon hearing that. Password? No. First password. You win this time. Unlike Ida, who wasn't entertained by their chat, Luz couldn't help but smile during this interaction. Sigh, we got no time for this, Hootie, she said, trying to get his attention. Let us in already, he said, looking annoyed. Everything is fine. Geez. At least Naruto enjoys himself, but you never want to. Oh no. Hooray, as they all enter, the owl retches and burps once more. Welcome to, she says, snapping her fingers, the owl house, causing unnecessary gasps as the house started performing magical tricks, like Mickey Mouse's Fantasia house with illuminating elements like the ceiling. When Naruto heard that, she raised an eyebrow, remembering her strange relationships. Where I hide away from the pressures of modern life, also the cops, also ex-boyfriends. This location is stunning. Luz then turns to face Naruto and asks, "Do you and your mother live here alone?" Ida turned to Luz in astonishment as Naruto was taken aback by this inquiry. They heard thudding footsteps at this point. Hey, I'm not that old, she said, crossing her arms. Besides, he's not my kid, I'm just looking after him till his amnesia wears off. They peered to the corner of the room to see something coming down the hallway and said in a deep voice, "I do have an actual roommate, though like Naruto's he isn't paying rent." His voice immediately becomes high-pitched, defying reason, as he says, "Who dares intrude upon me?" The king of demons, Luz gasps and gets dressed as the Pokemon-like pet, with a towel wrapped around his head and torso, squeezes a rubber duck. K. Lindo. He's adorable, Ida. Who's a little guy? She asks, giving him a strong hug. Who is a little guy? Is that you? Is that you? When the pet tries to struggle, this simply enrages them. No. Who is your tiny guy? I have no idea. Who's this monster? Ida whiskers. His request was not met with a response. She points to Naruto and says, "Oh, this is Luz, the human," adding, "Naruto accidentally kidnapped her. She came after me. Yes, following your theft of my book. You put it in the garbage." Ida interrupted their arguments by saying, "Oh, you knew." The statement, "She's here to help us with our little situation," received a prompt reply. Oh. Cheers. Naruto then removes him from Luz's grasp and places him on the ground. Wait, Luz says, shaking her head. I don't like the sound of this situation, and she was correct to assume so. Just let me explain. King was once a mighty king of demons until his crown of power was stolen, and he became this. They all stare at King at this time, who seems to be insulted, especially by Luz's subsequent remarks. You mean this adorable tiny person? He instantly ducks behind Naruto, who has his hands in his pockets. The evil warden Wrath is holding the crown and it is sealed away behind a mystical force barrier that only a human, like you, can break through. If you assist us in retrieving his crown, we will return you to your realm. What do you say? Plus, who could resist this adorable face, she asks, swiftly picking up King. No. Don't encourage her, please. Oh, however, it ultimately gives her encouragement right after she lets go of King and makes a tiny flop and agony sound. I mean, we're kinda your only way home, so, I really don't have an option, do I? Nope. King squeezes the toy and says, soon, Mr. Ducky, we shall drink the fear of those who mocked us. Naruto and Luz just raise an eyebrow at this. As they got at basic prison, Ida started, the conformatorium, standing outside the enormous structure, a place for those considered unsuitable for society. Luz had already located their wanted poster on the wall by the time she finished. Ida smiles brightly as she says, whoa, these guys are really focused on you too. Luz looks at Naruto and raises an eyebrow. Yep, but we were never caught because we're too slippery, she says. The blonde began to smile and said, she meant that literally, one of my pranks did not go well, but Ida was now not grinning and was glaring at Naruto, so Luz looked between them. Are you still upset about your hair getting messed up by the big frozen explosion? Ida's eye twitches in response to King's question, but he ignores it and turns to face Luz. He gestures toward the opening at the top of the tower with his slender arms, saying, you, Naruto, and I will sneak up to the top of the tower, where they're holding my crown. Naruto raised an eyebrow in response to the statement, and I'm gonna make sure the warden's distracted. You mean to flirt when you say distracted? Hey, what are you assuming about me? Luz remained silent as she observed the scene between the two before her eyes widened. Don't know, but, the fox-eared teenager says, crossing his arms. When I got captured once, the warden kept asking me questions about you, like if you were single, and you seem to have gotten an idea from hearing that and how to use that to your advantage, she says. I should have brought a disguise, but I forgot. As she watched a lighting go out in her head, this attracted both of their attention to her. I've been waiting to use this, meow, meow, she said, pulling her hair up to display animal ears, which made Naruto look disgusted as he rubbed his chest. Yet no, that offends me. Quit being a drama queen, Naruto. When Ida finally taps her staff on the ground, a floating platform is created beneath their feet, allowing them to float in the air and straight towards the window. However, it vanishes as soon as Naruto grabs the ledge and Luz, who is also holding on for dear life, along with King. By the time they manage to pull themselves up, Ida has already started to head for the top. When the three enter, they discover a huge prison. You're Naruto? The sight of an older girl in a cell with vampire fangs and a ponytail caught their attention. Have you returned with the reviews? Did they like it or dislike it? The blonde flinched at this and turned his head away. She sighed in horror as she said, they all lo, it was trashed. Luz and King staring at one another. Wait, Luz said at last, bewildered, you've been here. Naruto recalled the man on his knees, pleading with him to help him win Ida's heart. Many times in fact, but each time I managed to escape the warden rather not think about it, he said with an uneasy expression. Naruto approaches the fanfic writer to slap it from her hands. Naruto, she said, pointing to another stack of papers. I've written an even better story, so pass it around and get their feedback. I know they know. I won't disseminate your bizarre fanfics about food falling in love, he says accusingly, pointing at her. People thought I was lying and I was the author. You have ruined my reputation, he yelled at the girl who was crossing her arms in frustration. We are free expression agents. They won't ever let us down, the conspiracy theorist teenager who was yelling in her cell, the world is going to end, caught their attention. We are nothing more than props for a higher power. Once more, the Demon King will rise. The group simply perspires as she yells that, and Naruto just looks at her bewildered. The fanfic writer sighed as she said, "Yeah, she's really big into conspiracy theories, don't stop blabbing about the coming end." "Wait," Luz said, perplexed, "those aren't crimes, you two haven't actually done anything wrong, you're just a bunch of weirdos, like us." Naruto looked at her, offended, before he stopped appreciating what he had done and simply grinned at the memories of his previous antics before the heart-thumping footsteps continued. "Warden Wrath is here. Go into hiding." As soon as he puffs into a fox that is hiding behind Luz, Naruto seizes her and drags her into a cell. Liz was horrified when the man's bulky form opened the door and entered, saying, "I can hear you," while Naruto remained expressionless. "What precisely are you idiots whispering about?" As he spoke, he slammed his right arm into the cell, denting it after his right arm turned into a hammer. His attention was drawn to the wanted poster on the floor. "Ah, the owl lady, I'll get my hands on her soon enough." He then turned to face Luz and King, but before he could consider them, the conspiracy nut job spoke. "Defend yourself against the opponent. We'll cooperate." Wrath's eye would have twitched in frustration if he could have said, "We shall win. You old queep, we will never be afraid of you." He was now standing in front of her cell as it was opening. "Away. I'm F." The masked warden grabbed her full body with one hand to silence her. As he said, "Let this be a lesson to all of you, there's no place in society for you if you can't fit in," someone yelled. "Ida will never go out with you because of this." At this time, Luz begins to perspire and turns to face the beaming fox who had slightly deepened his voice. "Who said that?" After examining several jail cells to his right, the warden went up to the one he thought said it, pausing in front of King and Luz, who were both horrified and gazed back. "I will be lenient with your punishment if you speak up now." Luz spoke first, and the two were startled by his demand. We remained silent. "And I'm afraid." The warden heard their voices and stepped back, scanning the cells, but he failed to identify the one he thought had said that. "There won't be food tonight just for that comment." His remarks elicited applause after surprising the warden. "Indeed, a respite from that god-awful meal. Go back to eating bugs, whelp. I wish the Heathwitch inspector would just show up already." The warden finally has enough and leaves the room, slamming the door behind him. There is silence for a moment until someone speaks. "Ah, I enjoyed that messy, sloppy feast." "Shut up, Carl." Now that Naruto was back to normal, he removed the jail bars, and Luz and King followed, the latter of whom was giving Naruto a scowl. Luz looks at the blonde, who doesn't appear to care, and asks, "Naruto, why did you do that? You could have caught us." But all he does is shrug his shoulders. She simply sighs at the blonde's recklessness before turning to the writer. "Didn't you hear me when I said I've escaped many times? Even if he caught us we could have still escaped," she remarked. She moans, "Don't worry, I can get you out," but the lever remained in place. "No. My weak nerd arms." Naruto now merely grimaced at Luz's remark, unsure whether to laugh or not. She leaves the dejected Luz behind, saying, "Just get out of here while you still can, kid, enjoy freedom for us," in contrast to Naruto, who had left the cell at that time but had returned for an unknown reason. At this point, the three of them started to move as a group, with Luz not at all happy, in contrast to Naruto, who was now tilting every picture frame in the hallway. Despite hearing all of that, Luz simply walks past Ida, confusing her. "Hey," Ida says, getting off in front of them from the window. I just checked, the warden is distracted by the conspiracy nap, doesn't help the fact that something must have pissed him off, so he's going to take time to torment some tiny creature. He won't be coming around here anytime soon. What's her deal? Don't worry about it, she's gonna be doing a 180 soon. Ida was even more perplexed by this as she saw Naruto leave, but she just grinned when she realized he had a plan. By this time, they had reached a big door with the words, "Contraband," printed on it. King rushes in, climbs on Naruto, and points to the door. "My crown." "It's close," he exclaims, grunting and pushing him. "I can sense its power, so hurry up and open it, Naruto. If you help me get my crown, I'll let you be my loyal subject." The blonde doesn't seem to be in the mood to obey, in contrast to Ida, who smiles. Ah, he gets so cute when he's thirsty for power, but Luz wasn't content in spite of this adorable moment. King, who was now gripping Naruto's leg as he attempted to kick him off, grunted and laughed in response to her statement. "It's not fair that they're all in here, they just want to be themselves. Why does everyone think that being a weirdo is so bad? Come on, before he hurts himself," she urged, and then she waved her staff once, causing the door to unlock. King then let go and charged inside the chamber, with the others trailing behind him to gaze at the enormous orb light that had zapped him when he touched it. "We have a human, remember?" "Oh, yeah." Luz takes a deep breath, steps into the light, and vanishes from view. After 2 minutes, slap, Luz just finished sulking as she observed King reveling while donning the Burger Queen crown. He points at the startled fox and says, "Yes, yes. I can feel my powers returning. You, there, Naruto. Your new name is Whiskers, now hurry and find me Stead so I can lead my army of darkness, haha." Naruto simply smiled and cocked an eyebrow, but shrugged. "As you wish, my liege. Shall I prepare you bubble bath and ducky when we get back?" "Yes." Luz was unable to handle it at this time and spoke to Ida incoherently. "That crown doesn't give him any powers, does it?" Ida smiles as she sees King riding on Naruto's shoulders and says, No, truth is King was more so a pet to a demon a long time ago, not sure what happened but he got turned into the king we know now, a lovable softie. Luz, King, Naruto, and I don't have much in this world, we only have each other, so if that dumb crown is important to King, it's important to us, and besides, we weirdos have to stick together, you know. Well, we owe you one. Now, let's get out of here before the warden finds us and loses his head, Ida says, her eyes widening as he hears something and turns quickly just as something comes flying from the open door, instantly cutting off Ida's head that Naruto caught. Luz screamed in horror until the head spoke, and Wrath exclaimed, too late, having to hurl a causer like a blade at the witch. Ow! Oh, I hate it when that happens, Luz, who was even more appalled, screamed again. Ida! How? This just happens when you get older, does it? Wrath was approaching the party while they were having this little talk, accompanied by guards. He approaches the gathering and quickly removes Kong's crown, much to Kong's despair. He attempted to jump to get to it, but to no effect. Finally, I have you cornered, Ida the Owl Lady, he says. My guards could never get you, but I knew if I took your pet's toy, you'd come running, he said, smashing the hat with a hand motion that horrified King as Ida's body started to move in search of its head. While Naruto displayed annoyance, the pet who couldn't stand to look at the crown sobbed, no. My power. He takes a long breath and pulls out a bouquet of flowers. Now that I have you here, I can finally ask you something, he says, will you go out with me? The group is bewildered, with the exception of Naruto, who merely sighs. Go, boss. You the warden. The guard and warden gave each other thumbs up, and Naruto grimaced. Luz became frightened at this time. You've always eluded our capture, you've always been the one who got away, I found that alluring. I hate everything you're saying right now, I think that might be his kink. The warden yells, you stay out of this, as he discards the flowers and turns his right arm into tentacles that slam into Luz and Naruto. The tentacles wrap around both of them, but unlike Luz, Naruto did not struggle as he witnessed the warden grab Ida by the hair. He looks her head up and down and says, it's not like you can say no right now, but he heard a snort in spite of everything. So how about it, Owl Lady? The most powerful witch of the Boiling Isles and the feared warden Wrath, we be the strongest power couple ever, I mean, it's, well, ex-warden you mean, Wrath said, turning to face the grinning Naruto who had been drawn closer, prodding him in the air only inches from his nose. And why is that? They heard a big explosion at this point, and the warden turned to face the door, where he saw guards running frantically, one of them stopping at the door. The warden then turns to face Naruto in rage and removes his mask to reveal a monster, saying, Warden, the prisoners are all out. The cells have all been opened. What did you do? Left a clone of myself in a cell in order to let all the prisoners out, you should have really had a guard stand by watching them all, the monster said, enraged, before he stopped lifting Naruto. Fuidum. He turns at that moment to see a large group of inmates charging directly at him, tackling the warden, dropping Naruto, who lands on his feet. Luz is shocked and just looks at Naruto in awe, while Ida's body finally finds the head and she laughs as she watches the scene of a group of random inmates attacking the warden, one of them using the actual food as a weapon. Get that away from me. The entire prison was in complete pandemonium at the time, with inmates rioting and guards wondering who in the world was meant to watch over the inmates, so they left. The blonde smiled broadly as Ida said, "Hehehe, well this didn't go exactly to plan but it still works out in the end," and patted Naruto's back. "One of your better chaotic pranks I might add," she said, and the four of them swiftly boarded Ida's staff and flew out the window, missing the fact that flames began to appear from the windows because one of the prisoners was an actual criminal arsonist. It didn't help that he could breathe fire. The blonde who was sitting on the couch with her legs resting on a leg rest said, "Well, that was fun. So what now?" "Well, a deal's a deal, let's get you home," Ida says, pulling out her key and pressing the I button. Luz looks at the suitcase as it opens into a door and then turns to face the group when she sees King looking down with a dejected expression. "I know it's not the same, but a king shouldn't be without a crown," she says as she approaches them. "Before I go," she says, revealing a doll and removing its crown to give it to the king. He put it on his head and exclaimed, "This shall suffice," adding, "You there, Whiskers. You are now under my command." His words caused a chuckle as he got to his feet. "I'll prepare the bubble bath," he said, pausing as he spoke to look at Luz, who had been given back her book and was gazing thoughtfully at it before turning to face them in the mirror and grinning. "I don't fit in at home, you don't fit in here, if I stay, we could not fit in together, I'm not going back to summer camp," Naruto said, surprised by her statement. "Okay, I know you got your head cut off, and Naruto started a prison riot, but this was the most fun I've ever had," he said. Ida, who doesn't understand what's going on, thought this was humorous. "What's summer camp? What are we talking about here?" With the book in front of them, she declared, "I want to stay and become a witch like you and Azra." "What? Okay, that's absurd, humans cannot turn into witches, she said, but her denial was refuted. The thought, maybe that's because they haven't tried, if you teach me to become a witch, I'll do anything you want, came to Kong. Let her stay. She can make us snacks, Ida said, the final line being muttered but still audible to everyone. Well, I could use a hand keeping this goofball out of the cupboards and Naruto from bonding with Hooty too much, starting to freak me out, she says, taking King in her arms. Alright, I'll teach you how to be a witch, but you have to work for me before you learn any spells, deal? She received a large hug in place of a handshake, and she squeezed King between them. Too tight. Too tight. What's happening? Naruto merely smiles at a new family member while viewing this. Perish. Perish. Perish, King repeatedly yelled, Kane the froth of Naruto, who sat across from him eating a bowl of quick ramen from the human world, stabbing his multi-eye egg breakfast. Yawn. After hearing the sound, Naruto turned away from King and took several steps. More, Naruto bowed as he looked at Luz, who appeared to be a stereotypical witch. Do you remember me? Luz. She grunted upon a floating cup hitting her in the back of the head. Yesterday, she quickly realizes that King and Naruto are staring at her as she speaks. You seeming like a stereotypical, which makes me unsure whether I should laugh or take offense once more. The human girl was taken aback by this and was unaware of it when Ida was making her drink. She lifts the cup in her hand and says, Kid, stop talking about the specifics. I haven't even had my cup of apple blood yet. You're referring to apple juice? Nope, Naruto replies peacefully as he eats his ramen. Apple blood is from apple monsters, they're like human apples but they actually have a kill count, which made Ida slurp and the female swallow. Ida slurps her drink once more before Luz returns to the subject of the woman seated on the table between the fox and the cat/dog demon thing. Don't let the name fool you, they are vicious monsters, one is easy but 1,000, yeesh, Ida says. Give me a magic staff, and teach me some spells. Should I have brought my own runes? Do you have a perilous magical quest for me? Luz said in a terrible gasp that attracted Naruto's attention. Naruto simply lets out a huge sigh and turns to Ida. When King says, if you don't hurry up and explain things, Ida, she's gonna continue acting like a stereotype while wearing that traffic cone and bathrobe. The girl tilts her head in confusion. As opposed to King, who chuckles, what is traffic? In contrast to Naruto, who concealed his hat beneath the table, Ida now takes her hat and blows on it, causing dust and soot to fly everywhere and on King's food. The demon, gazing at his now black food, complained, I wasn't done picking at the eyeballs yet. However, a magic staff, with a sincere look of curiosity, Ida asks, you want one? Luz responded to that by giving a crazy nod. Ida smiles and clicks her fingers, saying, more than anything, come to me, magical employees. With this command, there was instantaneous clattering and then shattering noises. Naruto then leaned slightly to see what was happening with King around the corner, and Ida merely sighed before the staff, wrapped in clothing, came crashing in and slammed into Ida's face as she grunted. It's early, she says, putting explanation mode into motion. Now, witches are awarded their staffs from school, with me as your teacher, you'll be taking a different approach, she says, picking up a sack from the floor and dropping it in front of Luz. You'll have to work for it. I run a few businesses. On weekends, I offer rare human treasures that Naruto drags over from your side of the realm, but most days I sell only the finest homemade elixirs and potions, she tells Luz, gesturing to the sack. Snake oil. No one wants an unoiled snake, so follow me, the two said as they started to leave Naruto and King and go for the balcony. After they left, they exchanged glances and wondered who would have to watch Luz on her mission. It took them a minute or two to return. Luz was bewildered when Ida said, "Remember, never befriend a man in sandals and always measure twice, cut once," as she led her back into the room. "Ah, good luck." Despite what she had been taught, Luz appeared extremely perplexed and turned to face Naruto, who had only shrugged as he finished his bowl of ramen, causing Ida's fingers to snap in recognition. "Oh yeah, you'll need a guide," she says, glancing at Whiskers. "Off you go, Naruto," he says, turning to face her with a frustrated frown. Wouldn't it be preferable to demonstrate what to do to her face to face? The witch simply shook her head, ignoring what he had to say. He put his bowl on the table and walked up to Luz's side, but she looked at Ida. "Nope, I'm busy, and since you brought her here you can watch her," he said. Immediately, complaints were heard. "Wait," as she was speaking, the witch interrupted her by shoving the two in the direction of the opening door and hurrying them through it. As the door closed in front of them, Luz was perplexed by the last line, which read, "Remember what I said and trust Naruto, yet if he asks you for a favor don't do it, learn that the hard way." The human turned to face the naive Naruto, who had changed into a fox and behaved endearingly, but even so, Luz's eyes narrowed suspiciously, and he changed back into his humanoid form as the door opened. "Be back by nightfall or risk mortal peril. Naruto makes sure she doesn't lose any limbs," Luz reiterated, and this time, rather than being perplexed, she turned to face Naruto, who had his back to her, in concern. "Relax, just avoid talking to everyone." Hootie remarked, "Have a nice trip," as he looked at the two of them, and Luz smiled while carrying the luggage over her shoulder. "I suppose it's time to start moving forward," Naruto responded by changing back into a fox and climbing on the startled Luz to enter her hood, which he used as a seat. "You'll have to do the walking because I'm still exhausted." "Now hurry up, giddy up." Luz was just staring at him blankly after hearing it, as though she wasn't even momentarily impacted, before she sighed. "You're lucky, you look adorable," she says as she starts to leave the home and heads down the trail. "Let's move on," she says. "Whoa," when mutters Luz arrives at a market corner and observes several species interacting with one another while they shop, converse, or engage in some contentious activity. "You mean that people are different?" asks the hood fox, who had shrunk to fit completely inside her hood and was able to slumber while still having excellent hearing. "It's amazing, and I'm the only person here. I've only ever seen places like this in my fantasies." That he opened his eyes and looked up at her when she asked him that. With a cry of horror, Luz said, "You dreaming about something like this is pretty weird, but no, you're the only human here. The last one was eaten by the ground." "How did he pass away?" "Wano, he wasn't buried, he was eaten by the literal ground eater, which reminds me, if you see a crack, don't step on it," Luz said, perspiring as she glanced around rapidly. Her eye twitched when she heard laughter coming from her hood. "You're joking, aren't you?" Luz's eyes widened as she realized, "For a human, you're pretty gullible," he said, sensing her glare before he spoke. "But yes, so far, you're the only human here. We don't get that many humans who stumble into this world," he said. She gasped, "What if I, Luz Nocida, an ordinary teen, actually had a predetermined path of Gria?" Naruto's paw repeatedly patted her cheek, interrupting her. "No, no, no, it was an accident since you decided to follow an adorable fox into a shady-looking house. After you took my book. Again, you put it in the trash." The two kept walking down the street toward their destination while they were back and forth. In any case, I'm delivering parcels today, but tomorrow my magical abilities will win me the admiration of all the people on the Boiling Isles. This only made Naruto snort as he positioned his paws on Luz's cheeks in front of his face. As the fox grabbed him by the back of his neck to pull him in front of her face, the girl glared at him. "It's adorable that you think that will all happen in a day, guessing that's human naivety for ya," she said. "Why are you attempting to undermine me?" "Because not everything is based around you being the main character in this world," he said, before reverting to his human form with a plume of smoke. "Besides, this place is nothing but a backwater archipelago, compared to the actual empire south of here. This place is nothing," Luz said, with a startled twist of her head. "Hold on, kingdom," as she takes hold of his shoulders, her eyes gradually enlarge and she smiles. As in, something other than the Boiling Isles, Naruto merely looks at her before letting out a sigh. Naruto raises one finger and says, "Yeah, the Demon Empire for one. The Empire is a single unified kingdom that is in charge of this realm, just like the other realms," he says. At this time, he can see her smile growing, which makes Naruto perspire. "You read about this realm, didn't you?" "Nope." Naruto was now rubbing the back of his head, trying to think of anything to say, and after a few seconds, he finally did. "First things first, the underworld, in general, is not affiliated with hell. That's an entirely different thing." He pauses to observe her take notes while he simply looks at her, thinking this is pointless because he prefers to play practical jokes and such antics. "Anyways, the underworld is a separate place and you can think of it as Earth's reverse world or something. In the underworld, there are 7 realms, one being this entire realm including the Boiling Isles and the Demon Empire. This place doesn't fall under the Demon Empire's jurisdiction, and before you ask, no, I don't know why I didn't really pay attention to Ida teaching," after which Naruto turns his back on Luz and begins to walk alongside the human. "What gives the Boiling Islands the appearance of a gigantic corpse?" "That's because it's from a dead titan, and no, I don't know how it died or what a titan is or why there aren't any more." The girl, who wanted to learn more about the location from Naruto as they were delivering, was both intrigued and further perplexed by this. It took Luz an hour to realize that there was no chance of delivery because most deliveries were either taken or completely devoured by a monster. Eventually, the two were walking down an alleyway, the human standing behind the kid with the fox ears. Luz frowns once again and says, "I thought being human made me special, but all it's doing is making me get screamed at or eaten like the doorbell mouth." "That's the Boiling Isles for you, then." Luz looks sorrowfully at her book as Naruto shrugs, not really caring about what has transpired. She shows the blonde the wizard page and says, "At this time, I would have already been dispatched on an enchanted quest. Where is my quest-granting wizard? Simply put, they don't exist." Luz's eyes widened as she said, "I'm not sure what sort of wizards you humans have, but to us here, wizards aren't real but merely fanfiction." Luz simply picks up her big bag, disappointed. "This has been a rough day," the two murmured, and then they started to go on. However, as they continued down the passageway, they came to a remarkable sight, a huge castle. "Nice." After saying so, she dashes to the doorbell, Naruto sighing behind her, and then she chases after the girl who pressed it, getting a ring as the doors open. "The last time I've seen a house like this," Hootie said it ablaze out of jealousy, which widened Luz's eyes. "Which reminds me, don't mention this to Hootie, he gets really jealous of better-looking homes." "Noted," Luz remarked as the door opened and he entered right away. "Hey." The door then closes behind Naruto, who saw but pursues Luz. "Sure, walk into a stranger's home, doesn't scream kidnapping at all," he said. As soon as he said, "I'm delivering a package from Miss Ida, the owl lady," lights were turned on, illuminating the spacious room and, more importantly, the owner, who was a stereotypical wizard. "Today just got good, magical wizard," he said, that in contrast to Naruto, who was scanning the area to see whether anything looked valuable enough to steal and whether the man was indeed malevolent. Luz was joyfully running in place. "And who might you be, with curious eyes?" "I was in my oscillarium, reading the stars," he says, pausing at the foot of his stairway to gaze at them. He strokes his beard as he looks at the two people Luz approaches. As he grabbed the sack, Naruto interrupted her, saying, I'm. He approaches the man, who seems perplexed by the illusion but accepts the bag and says, "Listen, Gandalf, we have your order." "That's your order, right?" But even after hearing that, he glances at it once before turning back to Luz and grinning once more. She blushed with shame and joy as she said, "Young lady, dare I say, I sense something unusual about you. Would you please join me for tea?" While the so-called magician makes seats and a table with goodies on it, the human made a gasp. In contrast, the fox had already set his sights on a vase that looked costly and had his name on it. The happy girl answered, "Okay," but Naruto grabbed her shoulder and stopped. He squinted at the grinning elderly man and said, "Let's go." "Don't judge a book by its cover," he said. "You mean to make assumptions based on appearances?" "No." Yet another terrible one responds, "But the stars on his robe are sparkling, and notice the newborn fox in his beard. Perhaps you two could become friends." At this time, Naruto was merely gazing at her with an angered expression, but he let her go. As Luz spoke to the wizard, now known as Adagast, Naruto turned to start searching the room for items to steal that would fit in his pockets. "Know what, go on right ahead, call me when you find out the wizard isn't all magical all he seems," Naruto said, not giving a damn. When Adagast added, "Well, I have a quest," the two heard a crack and turned to gaze at a broken vase instead of Naruto, who was standing next to it whistling. Adagast gave Naruto a blank look similar to Luz's before the guy shook his head. "Do you want to embark on a quest?" "Yes." As he spoke, Naruto saw Adagast pull Luz away, looking irritated once more. Naruto simply walks away, losing interest, and moves on to the diamonds and other items to steal. He picks up a diamond, but it suddenly loses its color and transforms into a rock. The prophecy speaks of a young human girl who will claim the celestial staff and free this world from an ancient dot. What the? Naruto quickly forms and turns to discover that the entire room has been transformed into an old, dilapidated castle. His blood runs cold at the sight of this, and he rushes to the door Adagast led Luz to. When he opens it, he discovers that they have left, the chamber is likewise dilapidated, and a wall is missing. Why, that piece. His body is wrapped in smoke as his form transforms, and he didn't even realize that a pair of eyes was watching him as he did so. As he spoke, Naruto grew more irate that he had fallen for such a simple deception. At this point, Luz was so terrified that she whimpered and held a tree branch to her chest as she woke up in the middle of the woods, surrounded by a purple mist. "Naruto!" "Adagast," Luz called, but got no response as she frantically searched the area. "Can you guys hear me?" However, she turned to be grateful to find that Adagast had arrived when she finally heard trees breaking. Luz, the human, wizard of magic. Luz was introduced to a large, light mauve octopus-like creature with actual arms among its tentacles. It grinned with its yellow teeth and gums showing while its black scaras with yellow iris and black pupils eyes fixate on her. Your hubris has failed you, he said, his form becoming loose as his eyes practically fell out and his body becoming slack. Which apprentice, he said. Luz tries to back away, but two tentacles appear behind her using puppets. What? After being encircled, she swallows heavily and says, "Okay, Luz, don't panic, this is classic Chosen One biz. You just have to defeat the final boss despite skipping the entire quest," but this only made her laugh. "Don't you see, you idiot? You are not the Chosen One, and neither am I a wizard." To Luz's terror, his laughing escalates into full-fledged evil laughter before chains appear to restrain her. "What? No. What are you doing?" The monster responded to her desire by saying, "Your mentor needs to be eliminated because she has been taking clients from my potions business for years." He grinned and said, "And she will definitely come once I catch her adoptive son." Luz was concerned about his idea. "He'll be here shortly, you just drew him into my trap." "All because you wanted to think you were special," he said, getting euphoric as he saw the hurt in her eyes deepen. Her eyes then widened and she turned to face him with faith. "Because Naruto isn't foolish enough to fall for your trap, joke is on you." But when he hears what she says, he laughs. "Oh please, he's a brat," he says, rubbing his hands together. "I'll earn a nice profit once I sell Naruto on the black market and give Ida to the Emperor's coven, leaving you that human lady." He was just speculating about how much money he would receive at this stage when a dark shadow passed over him. Why? He looked up to see a falling tree falling directly on him. "What the?" He moved to the right, but several tentacles became stuck beneath it, startling Luz, who noticed a huge cloud of smoke forming behind the tree. With it, she saw something move and shrink, and a single large monster fox leap out of it, quickly approaching Luz and growling at the octopus that was busy freeing his arms. She was interrupted when her chains vanished, releasing her as the monster freed himself. "And Naruto, is that you? Why are you so small? Just be good children and surrender already or else I'll." He turns to face the two as Naruto inhales deeply. He was silenced when he used his tentacles and puppets to block a large fireball courtesy of Naruto, gaining a painful yell as Sot covered his tentacles, but before anything could happen, the fox grabbed Luz by the back of her hoodie. Wait," she began, but was interrupted as she fell onto his back. "Remain calm." As he makes off in the other direction, she hears him and catches his fur. "Why you too? I'll have my reve." He heard a tree branch crack and spun quickly, but all he saw was black because a spear had pierced his head, sending him falling backward and onto the ground before he was converted to dust. It seems my journey has met its end, for I have found him," he said as he turned and began to leave, throwing away the cloak to reveal his odd appearance. He was wearing a butler's uniform, which included dark blue pants, a dark blue 6-unbuttoned double-breasted tailcoat, a white dress shirt, and a black vest. He was also wearing white gloves with specific symbols embedded in them, and a monocle over his right eye, which had a scar that ran down his forehead, over his eye, and down his face, but the eye was unharmed, displaying a black sclera and a light green iris. The right side of his head had shaven hair to reveal the scar when from his chin over his skull, and the right side had spiky gray with black highlights. Muttered the fox, who had halted a few kilometers away with Luz still on his back. "Think we're good here," before he got off Naruto, who turned to face her. When she said, "Naruto, I'm sorry," something other than, "You are forgiven," was said right away. For believing in some creepy wizard who turned out to be a big jerk, and sigh, and next time I'll listen to your advice instead of brushing it off. At this moment, Naruto simply smiles triumphantly at being proven correct, but he also notices how annoyed and bothered she was. "Good girl," he says, patting her head with his big furry tail. "This place is nothing like I imagined," Naruto says as he transforms back into a person and stands in front of her. "Naturally, it isn't. Not everything is based on a fairy tale book. If you don't want to be let down, it will be more enjoyable if you stop expecting things that involve comparisons to your book." Luz was unable to contain her joy upon hearing that. "That's not a bad idea," Naruto says, nodding before he yawns at last. "Transforming into larger forms really takes a toll on my stamina," he says, yawning louder this time. "Let's walk back," he says, but Luz follows him as he starts to move. "Did you learn how to utilize magic from Ida?" Even so, Naruto smiles and turns to face Luz. "Nope, only bits of bobs I recollect from my amnesia," he says thoughtfully. "I've been with Ida for almost 4 years since she found me. So far it's like I can remember some stuff I can do but nothing of who I am," he finished by saying, "but honestly speaking, I'm not as bothered as you think when it comes to that. I'm pretty happy right now," which made Luz smile as well. They were both going back, but they were unaware that the wheels of fate were turning and that an even worse fate was waiting for them. As he talked, Luz nodded, which prompted Naruto to continue. "So let me get this straight," he said, sitting in front of Luz at a table. "You pretended to be an abomination to help out some girl and in turn got her an A+ while I was off delivering potions for the day." Another nod was offered in response, which upset the blonde. "Yet one of her classmates got jealous and after getting in trouble for catching you eat a sandwich gets sent to the principal's office only for her to return with said principal who wanted to cut you open," she stated. "She really wanted that A. You're telling me," she sighingly pulled out a banner with her face on it and the words, "banned," above it as he yelled and facepalmed at the entire incident. She says, "Now I can't go back until it's been lifted," but she still smiles piteously. "Yet, even so, I've still got a great teacher," which made Naruto smile and acknowledge Ida as her teacher. "Well, I'll tell you one thing, she's thrilled at you getting your first wanted poster." "Yes, I am aware." King eventually spoke up at this time, separating himself from them in the corridor. "Your lessons are about to begin, Luz." Naruto was perplexed by this. "I have everything prepared." After saying that, he backs off as Naruto gives her a suspicious look and she gives him a smile. "Want to learn more about demons with King?" However, in contrast to her, Naruto nodded and expressed immediate skepticism about what she said. While Luz was filming King behaving cute by tearing a sock apart, she said, "And here we have the most fearsome creature in the world, the king of demons, facing his natural enemy, the ducky sock." Naruto was staring at the film of King's epic struggle with the sock, which he eventually prevailed in, over Luz's shoulder. "Ducky sock, where are you now?" He stands triumphant as he shouts that, and Naruto just looks at him, wondering where he obtained that sock. "So, what made you call us here once more?" Luz inquires as she looks up from her phone and at the young child who understands what's going on and hastily ascends a table to tell them why. Naruto raised an eyebrow in response to the statement. "Human Luz, you've been so obsessed with witchcraft that you haven't learned anything about my kind. Get ready for Demons 101, he said. He swiftly lifts his arms to pull back the curtain, exposing a board with demons of all sizes and forms, but especially the 9 shadowy ones at the top. King put a cap on his head and held out a magazine with a dog that he believed to be a malevolent monster. "Demons like me are grim tricksters of the twilight, creatures of sulfur and bone," he said. "And cute little paws." As King mutters in frustration, "and cute little paws," Luz laughs and responds, "True, we live only to create chaos and misery, our only weaknesses are purified water and passive-aggressive comments, sometimes. Naruto looks perplexed. Comments that are passive-aggressive? No comment. But that doesn't. No comment. Unlike Luz, who thought it was again adorable, Naruto simply looks at King in amazement at his refusal to provide an explanation. Oh, you guys are sensitive. Hey, with a somewhat agitated expression, King said, even demons have inner demons. What? The most powerful demon of all is the Snaggleback, tearing off a poster to reveal a shell monster with a demonic appearance. Naruto interrupted him by raising a hand. Isn't it the 9 lords? 9 what? Luz now turns to Naruto, much to King's ire at being disregarded. He began, the 9 lords who rule the demon empire, basically but King interrupted him with a loud, endearing cry. Lies, the pet yells, gesturing toward Naruto, they are nothing compared to the Snaggleback. King was also interrupted by Luz, who was occupied with making a remark about it being a bad boy and embellishing its image with colorful phrases. Naruto just makes a bewildered face after being made to study the history of the demon realms by Ida, who wasn't much of a history teacher. Luz, pay attention, this information could save your life someday and I'm already dealing with someone spreading lies. No, I am so paying attention, she says, putting on a mocking expression even though she didn't mean to. This is my paying attention face, she says as she nods, and both King and Naruto look at her blankly, not believing her at all, until we hear a loud crack of thunder outside. Uh-oh, looks like it's gonna rain. Hootie's not gonna like this. Luz stood up and thought differently than they did. I love the oof. Naruto grabbed her by the hood and drew her back. Unless you humans have heat-resisting skin, which you don't, I suggest you not to do that. Heat-resisting what? Then, much to Luz's dismay, Hootie opens the door to discover raindrops falling from the sky, one of which strikes a flower and quickly wilts it while steam emerges from it. Ida shouted, boiling rain, as she dashed into the house at full speed. Everyone stay inside, she said, and as she did so, she dashed inside, the door closing behind her. Ida shouts, phew, as she looks out the window. That was close, any longer and it was gonna get painful, she says, turning to the bewildered Luz, who is attempting to understand that the rain boiling was just another arbitrary event in the demon realm, while Naruto smiles without much concern. The humans sat next to Naruto and King and said, wow, as they watched Ida perform a spell while shielded by a barrier. A boiling rainstorm on the boiling isles, the weather here is so fun, she said. Naruto simply turned to face her like King, as though she had gone insane, and Ida turned to face him. Not sure why you think this is fun, I've been to your world a couple of times before when I went to Vegas, I would trade our weather for yours since we got plagues, sharknadoes, shale hail, painbows, this intruder Luz to whom King responded. As Ida turned to face them, Luz instantly closed her hoodie and said, it's like a rainbow but looking at it turns you inside out. Luz was taken aback when Naruto spoke up and said, so, until the boiling rain stops, no one except Naruto is allowed outside tonight. Naruto's sole response to Luz's staring at her friend was, I can take it. And if the rain doesn't get you, the Snaggleback will. The King opens up a book with pictures of Snaggleback that said, they wander the rain feeding on boiled tourists, made Ida laugh. She was almost finished with the spell in her hands when she said, how many times do I have to tell you, King, the Snagglewhat's-it story is blown out of proportion, I've seen it in person and I gotta say I'm not impressed. King objects, saying, well, whatever the case, this force field spell should protect the house from boiling rains and small demons. Hooty started to stare at Ida, saying, "Hoot. Well, hurry it up with that force field, that rain is getting closer to my precious manga collection, I'm not losing another one." Hooty had Luz's eyes pop up and swivel to face him. "You have a manga collection?" "Yup. Can I see it?" "Nope." Luz stares at Hooty in shock until Naruto touches her shoulder. Even so, Luz appeared dissatisfied as Ida finished using her staff to seize the light bulb and stamped the staff to the ground, creating a force field that protected the house. "I advise not talking to him about his collection, it's basically his most prized possession," Luz said. Luz said, "Wow," as she removed her hood to gaze at the smiling witch who was coming toward them. "Someday I'd like to be as cool as Ida the Owl Lady, magical, sassy, surprisingly foxy for her age," Hooty replied. Ida got close and poked Hooty's eye, saying, "She's in her fort owl." She told him, no one likes their age being told, and then she turned to Luz, who raised her voice. Ida smiles when someone asks, "Hey, why do they call you the Owl Lady, anyway?" "'Cause I'm so wise," Hooty snorted, drawing Ida's glare once more. "That hurts." Hooty frowned at Ida for prodding his eye once more. "'Cause she coughs up rat bones ow, stop doing that." "Then stop making me sound old or weird," Hooty said, but this made Ida glare. When King eventually said, "He's not wrong," the witch became irritated. "You are like an owl, you get distracted by shiny objects," King said. Ida was instantly mesmerized when Naruto responded, "No, I don't," by pulling out a human world pen with a crystal on the back that he pressed to turn on the light. As soon as she exclaims, "It sparkles and shimmers, it shines and delights, I must have it for my nest." Naruto gets wide-eyed and sidesteps, causing her to jump face-first into the door. Hooty laughs as Ida rubs her face. She usually tries to grab it, maybe she's trying new things. Naruto and King said such things as they watched Ida get to her feet with a frustrated expression on her face and Luz assist her. "You have a nest." "I want a nest." "Nest party," Ida said, not looking really satisfied, before rambling on. She scratches the back of her neck, not enjoying the face-to-door interaction. "Ugh, that force field really took it out of me," she says. In response, Ida grabbed King's hat and pulled it down over his face, saying, "Uh-oh, moving a little slow, age finally catching up to ya." As Ida entered the house, King screamed, "Ah! Darkness," and needed assistance taking it off. Luz said, "This is perfect," and King was perplexed and upset by her remarks. "Since we'll be stuck in the house all night, Ida won't have any excuse not to teach me a spell," she said. But that tactic of persuasion didn't work. "But don't you want to finish our lesson? I was gonna let you scratch a demon's tummy, me." Luz looks at him regretfully and says, "Oh, sorry, King, but magic." With that, she rushes after Ida, frustrating King, whose hat deflated as he pursued her, but before Naruto could follow, he froze. Musical notes, Naruto turns quickly because, in spite of the rain, he could hear it clearly as if it were in front of him. It was a violin, and it made him feel calm because it was so serene, but it also bothered him before he quickly closed the door behind him because he didn't want to remain outside any longer. By the time he reached the others, he was already in the middle of a conversation with Ida, who was wearing pajamas. She covers her body with a blanket and says, "I'm not teaching you magic tonight," but Luz wasn't going to be turned away despite her drowsiness. Luz appears to be pleading, saying, "Please, Ida, please. If I don't know any spells, how am I supposed to earn my witch's staff? No, sleep, she says as the blanket now covers her head, making everything seem hopeless and disappointing to Luz. Naruto just looks at her, observing how disturbed she was, before he sighs and scratches her head before turning on the pen and instantly eliciting a response from Ida, who sat up in her blankets and stared at the light, surprising Luz, who eventually caught it. Have fun, he says, waving him away from Luz, who then turns to Ida and smiles gratefully at him. Meanwhile, Naruto was heading upstairs as thunder and lightning were raging outside, yawning and paying little attention. He opened the closest door to the stairs to reveal a plain room, primarily consisting of a large bean bag that served as a bed with comic books, empty ramen cups, and other random items scattered all over the place. He simply plopped on his bed, but the first thing that he thought of when he saw darkness was the music. As he thought, why am I thinking about that, his eyes started to close because he wanted to sleep a little. Then he heard the violin again, and darkness came over him, but it was a different experience. When he entered the dream world, he was met with an unfathomable sight. He was in a blank space, floating aimlessly. Where am I? When he hears the words, destruction, pain, misery, revenge, he quickly turns to see it in the distance, with darkness eclipsing the white and innumerable voices emanating from it. What? Hoot, hoot. Just as he sat up, Naruto's eyelids suddenly opened, revealing that he had finally woken up from his sleep. With a puff of smoke, Naruto changed into a bigger fox and bounded through this door, charging downstairs as Luz and King arrived at the entryway. Hoot, oh hoot, that made Naruto bite his teeth. What? Naruto froze and reverted to his normal form as he stood beside an equally frozen Luz, both of them staring at the ripped-down door with Hooty not responding. However, what caught their attention was a creature with its claws digging into the door, staring at them before vanishing outside and telling them to run in Hooty's direction. She stared at Naruto, who was clearly shivering, and froze. Hooty! Are you in there? She asked, but he did not answer even after she poked him. Whatever did this escaped into the rain, what could survive that? She attempted to touch him, but he instantly burst into smoke, transforming into a tiny, terrified fox that leaps into Luz's arms with that terrified expression, leaving Luz even more perplexed as to why Naruto is acting this way rather than King, who had an idea. She became aware of this and said, "Oh, my gosh, the snaggleback. It feeds during the rains, it must have stumbled across our house and seen us inside," but before Luz could react, they heard howling and ran outside to witness the monster enter a window. Luz glares at the squealing King and says, "This is terrifying, so why do you look so happy?" "Because this could be a lesson. This would be a great way for you to see a wild demon up close and personal without Naruto being your personal savior like last time though," she says, looking down at the unresponsive Naruto. "Naruto," Luz murmured, lifting the terrified fox in front of her, but he seemed to be trapped in his own world, as though the monster had traumatized him. "Are you okay? We need your help too," she said, but she was unable to finish after hearing his mutters. Luz simply stared at the trembling fox before she swallowed and put her in her hood where he would be close. "Not again, I can't do it again, I don't want to hurt her again, I won't be able to forgive myself if I do it again," Luz said. "Let's hurry, Luz." King gets her attention. "What if Ida gets eaten?" "She's upstairs and defenseless because you knocked her out," King says, and Luz groans as the two rush inside. Without pausing, they grab the closest weapons, one of which is a hockey stick for Luz and the other is a stuffed animal. The two head for the stairs and start climbing, but they don't even bother to turn because a single figure stands at the doorway, staring at their backs. Back with the three, Luz and King reach the top, where they stare at Naruto's broken down door and Ida's, which is slightly open and moving, signaling them to close in on it, which they open. Oh, my gosh, Ida. The room was in ruins, the window was broken, and she was nowhere to be seen. She got snaggle-backed. This bothers her, so she looks at her nest more closely to discover the markings that resemble claws on her pillows. Luz stops as she can still hear murmuring, then turns to the pet. Ida. No. /marks, Naruto, can you, King? You're the demon expert, I need your help, she says, and he raises a hand in response. He quickly leaves the room after saying, I'll go get my demon book, leaving them alone. Luz seizes the opportunity and reaches into her hood. Naruto, she realizes he's not there, startling her as she gets up and searches around. Naruto, where are you? She asks, stopping as she hears a puff of smoke coming from the closet, where she can only see a small amount of smoke floating in the air, and she approaches it. When Luz heard the words, Naruto, are you, she stopped. Loud footsteps followed, and then she saw Y grow from the door. She turned, but as soon as she did, a hand shot out of the door, slightly opening it and drawing Luz inside while the door was still open enough to see outside. What they saw was a large black creature entering the room, with the only light coming from the window. Luz's eyes were drawn to the window, but it heard something and quickly turned and left the room. Sigh, thanks Naruto, but, Luz turns, only to be embraced tightly by the trembling blonde, startling her as her cheeks begin to flush but quickly cooling off when she sees the terrified expression on his face. Naruto, he said without replying, but he seemed to be deep in thought before he was startled out of it by her hands touching his face. Rather than gathering his thoughts, he let them fly apart when he found himself in a specific scene with Luz, his arms encircling her as she placed her hands on his face, but he quickly brought them back. He looked aside in embarrassment as she asked, Are you okay? You look very afraid. Do you know what that thing that attacked us was? It's Ida, Luz said, startled as she watched her friend move away. It's her curse, I've seen it once before, Luz said, still looking perplexed as she watched Naruto fully turn away from her. She pauses when she sees him around himself with his hands. If you saw it before, then why? As Luz's eyes widen and he begins to shake, he says, last year, it happened and I thought we were attacked. I thought it ate Ida and I lost myself. I became overtaken by my rage. I was the one who changed. I became the monster. By the time I regained control, I was standing over Ida who had returned to normal. There was a lot of blood, so much blood, at which point tears were welling in his eyes as he gripped his head, unable to forget the scene. Luz gazed at his horrified Naruto and said, Not again, I can't do it again, but her eyes widened as she heard King yelling as he hurried down the hall, followed by thunderous, roaring footsteps. She pauses and says, Naruto, and Naruto jumps and turns when he sees the door open and Luz running out toward King's location. More roaring can be heard, but he is left standing there, frozen in fear of what he did to Ida, before hearing Luz scream, which causes his eyes to widen. Musical notes, he heard the violin playing again in a moment, and it filled him with calm and peace. His eyes widened, his mind clear, and he immediately ran out of the room and the closet, not even noticing that there was a figure with a violin and a smile on his lips standing right next to the closet. While they were hiding on the balcony, King looked very upset and said, It prevents her from turning into that thing. She's turned into a nightmare and it's all my fault. I'm so sorry, Luz. I just wanted you to be into demons like you're into magic. I don't have many friends, and no one even pays that much attention to me. I thought maybe if I taught you, finally, someone would care about creatures like. King was interrupted by a ball of paper striking his head, causing the two to turn and see Naruto hanging in the balcony before pulling himself upon it, surprising them. Although Naruto displayed a newfound resolve, Luz was unnerved by how quickly he was able to move past what was perceived as trauma. "We can talk about our issues later, but we gotta save Ida," he said. "She'll start causing more damage if we don't do anything," he said. King's attention was captured by her comments. "Yeah, that's why King will be our key to understanding Ida. Ida's turned into some kind of demon. Who else knows more about demons than you?" King was only able to gaze at her and the glowing pen toy in her hand, which he accepts with joy and giggles before starting to work. King was already sketching on the wall when he said, "Let's see." She was bigger, covered in feathers, and had giant black eyes. Demons with black eyes are usually sensitive to light. That's it, light. Luz, use your human wonder rectangle, which made her raise her broken phone. "I can't, my camera's all blasted." "Then what about that light spell?" Naruto interrupted her by flicking her forehead. "You saw me, I can't draw circles in the air, I'm not like Ida," she says, putting down her phone and turning away in embarrassment. "I'm a sorry excuse for." She pauses when his finger touches her lips, saying, "Hey, what are you?" After Naruto puts a palm on his chin and says, "I've already acted hopeless like you're doing right now, and I'll tell you one thing, it's not helping," they start talking about what they should do. "So far, we'll have to rely on my fire since I can't use magic like Ida, so that will be the plan," Naruto says. When Ida, the demonic owl, heard a clicking sound, it turned to see one King clicking with the pen. "Grr," Ida said, plundering through the living room, upturning tables and scratching into couches without thinking twice. King lost his grasp and dropped the pen, causing the back to fly off and the light to become too dim and switch off. "Oh, what lovely thing do we have here?" he asks, clicking a few more times as if obnoxiously flaunting it by spinning it in the air. "It's just so dang shiny, oh, my, oh, crud." King glances at Ultron quickly and notices that Ida has gasped and then screamed in wrath, which King yells as he flees with the owl monster in tow. Ida then turns a corner and skids on books and papers, slamming into the wall at the end of the hallway. "I'm sorry, Ida," it says, looking up to see Luz covering its body with a blanket, which freaked her out. "But it's for your own good." It tears off the blanket to discover a fireball thrown directly in its face, the light winking at it as it grabs its face and the fur smoking. When King heard him exclaim, "Naruto, you were right," he turned to find him sprinting toward him while holding an additional elixir, which he then gave to Naruto. Good, now, he was unable to finish because Ida had screamed so loudly that he grabbed his ears in excruciating pain as glass broke from windows, vases, and the elixir he was holding, startling the teenager but leaving his ears bleeding. When the owl monster slammed into the staircase, Luz lost her balance and fell, but Naruto jumped for her in time to catch her. However, his friend froze when he saw the angry owl Ida glaring at them, so Naruto immediately moved in front of Luz in a protective but terrified manner, just like Luz and King, who were unsure of what to do before she closed his eyes. "Naruto, what?" Luz said. "Go away from my friends," King exclaimed, running full speed in Ida's direction, while the person in front of him turns with a raised clawed arm, ready to attack. King raises his arms even though it is obvious that this will have no effect. Naruto's mind went blank at that point because he could only close his eyes and could not do what he had done to Ida before, but then a violin started to play. That moment, Naruto opened his eyes and saw a scene he never expected to see. They were all taken aback and shocked by the sudden new voice, and the violins continued playing, which stopped Ida in her tracks as she stared at the man in confusion. "Quite the scene I've arrived at indeed," Ida said, growling at the man who was obviously dressed as a butler with his single viewable eye, his iris glowing as it stared at Ida while he stood across the hallway and away from them. Ida charged at the man with a fierce screech, but he abruptly changed his rhythm so that it sounded like nails against a chalkboard, but much worse, forcing Naruto to cover his ears while Ida screeched in agony, and both Luz and King grasped their ears as if they were affected the most. Roar! Ida jumps for the smiling man as he stops and holds out his violin, then abruptly turns it to reveal a talisman with a circle on it that displayed a complex design that he simply taps, causing the symbol to abruptly come off the paper and expand, unleashing blinding light and deafening sound by making the air oscillate, which blinds Ida and everyone else who couldn't see or hear until it finally ended with ringing still in the background. When they opened their eyes, however, they were met with the image of the person sitting on top of Ida, who was unconscious, playing his violin once more as if nothing had happened. What? Naruto could only stare in disbelief next to Luz, who had no idea what kind of magic he had used. "What just?" he asked, unable to comprehend who the man was. However, the man simply looked up at Naruto and, without realizing it, threw the violin and bowed over his shoulders before casually approaching the tense teenagers and stopping in front of them. His eyes met Naruto's, and before he spoke, he made a gentleman's bow. "We finally meet my master," he said, and the two tense teenagers were stunned a moment later, especially when they saw the man with so many secrets in his eyes. "Who?"